How do you use growth factor to find the initial amount? You use the formula y equals a times the quantity 1 plus or minus r. Fill in the values for the variables you do know, and solve the resulting equation for the unknown initial amount, a. Let's look at this more closely through an example. One week, a cafe sold a total of 345 cups of coffee. This was a 15% increase from the previous week. We'll call the previous week Week 1 and the following week Week 2. You want to find out how many cups of coffee were sold in Week 1. Since there has been an increase in coffee sold from Week 1 to Week 2, you can use this formula with a plus sign, fill in the amounts for the variables you know the values of, and solve the resulting equation for the unknown. The final amount y equals the initial amount a times the growth factor 1 plus r, where r is the growth rate. The final amount, y, is 345, because the cafe sold 345 cups of coffee in Week 2. The initial amount, a, is the number of cups of coffee sold in Week 1, which is the unknown. The growth rate, r, is equal to 0.15, since there was a 15% increase in cups sold from Week 1 to Week 2. 1 plus 0.15 is 1.15. That means the growth factor is 1.15. You're now ready to solve the equation. To solve it, you'll want to isolate a, meaning you need to get a alone on one side of the equal sign. So, you first divide both sides by 1.15. On the right-hand side, the 1.15s cancel out, while on the left-hand side, you take 345 divided by 1.15, which equals 300. Since this is an equal sign, it does not matter if the a is on the left or right side of it. That means in Week 1, there were 300 cups of coffee sold at the cafe. The same thing works for a decrease. Let's go over an example. The same cafe sold a total of 156 cookies in Week 2, which was a 35% decrease from Week 1. You want to find out how many cookies were sold in Week 1. You can use this formula with a minus sign, that is, a decay factor, fill in the amounts for the variables you know the values of, and solve the resulting equation. The final amount, y, is equal to the initial amount, a, times the decay factor, 1 minus r, where r is the decay rate. The final amount, y, is 156, because 156 cookies were sold in Week 2. The initial amount, a, represents the number of cookies sold in Week 1, which is the unknown. The decay rate, r, is equal to 0.35, since there was a 35% decrease in cookies sold from Week 1 to Week 2. 1 minus 0.35 is 0.65. That means the decay factor is 0.65. Notice how the decay factor always ends up being what's left after you deduct the decay rate. You want to find out how many cookies were sold in Week 1, represented by the variable a in this formula. To solve the equation, you'll want to isolate a, meaning getting a alone on one side of the equal sign. You divide both sides of the equal sign by 0.65. On the right-hand side, the 0.65s cancel out. On the left-hand side, 156 divided by 0.65 equals 240. So a equals 240. That means that in Week 1, there were 240 cookies sold at the cafe. To find the initial amount, you use the formula y equals a times the quantity 1 plus or minus r, and solve for the unknown variable a.